to our August meeting of the Safety Council and the first meeting of our fiscal year. We just had a steering committee meeting to go over a few of the technical items, and now we're going to invite our speaker after we have Steve Roth from BWC catch you up on all the news. And the one thing I would like to say, because I'm so excited, I have talked to you over 2 years now about us raising money for the service dog for the PTSD warriors. And with COVID last year, our efforts came to a screeching halt. We had 2 men outside the chamber come forward with the money, and we have raised to $25,000. The dog is now named Dayton in honor of the people who died at the Oregon district. And the search is now on to find that dog and that warrior down in Florida who will be trained to become partners. So I'm very happy. And if you participated, thank you very much. So Steve from BWC, take it.
Thank you, Julia. That's amazing news. That's fantastic. It's a warm summer day, so I just want to start off by if you have people out working in this heat today, make sure they stay well hydrated. It's going to be important today. Let's see. For the latest information on COVID-19 in Ohio, please visit coronavirus.ohio.gov. For the private employers on today, it's the true-up period for policy year 2021. So it's available now through August 15th. You must complete the report online using the payroll true-up report services offering. So if you haven't done your true-up, please get that done here before the 15th. Let's see, drug-free safety program deadlines approaching. If you're a private drug-free safety program for the July 1st policy year at the advanced level, you must submit your online drug-free safety program safety action plan no later than August 30th. I think you have a few more weeks to get that done, but if you haven't done so, please go online and get that completed at bwc.ohio.gov. And our distance learning opportunities for the rest of this month in August, we have a few more webinars. We have one yet today at 10 a.m. We have the 7 habits of highly effective safety teams. That's today at 10. And then August 24th, we're going to have BWC Transitional Work Program updates. And that kind of leads into this. We've revamped our Transitional Work Grant Program for Ohio employers who actively participate in the recovery and return to work of their employees. Employee eligible for a transitional work grant every 5 years, and it's at 100% reimbursement up to their approved maximum grant level based on the number of employees that you have. And this is a program where you work directly with a transitional work program provider, and they work on developing that plan with you, and then the Bureau pays the cost of that development. So it's a nice opportunity. You can learn more at bwc.ohio.gov. And then our training classes on August 18th, we have work zone, traffic control, and safety. So for the cities out there and your municipalities, if you're closing down lanes of traffic and you want to make sure you're doing it safely and correctly, this is a class that looks at that. So that's August 18th at 9:30 a.m. We're going to have a full day class delivered over 2 days on confined space assessment and work. So that's August 23rd and 24th. Both days will start at 9:30 a.m. and end just a little past noon. And then we have another full day class divided up over 2 days, electrical safety in the workplace through insight and implementation of NFPA 70E. That's going to be on August 31st, or excuse me, August 30th and 31st. And this is a class that focuses on the arc flash hazards from electrical systems and what one can do to follow the standard and keep your employees safe. And so that's both days start at 9:30 a.m. and go to 12:45 p.m. And you can register for any of these classes, the webinars, through the BWC Learning Center. That's bwclearningcenter.com. If you're participating in any of the BWC discount programs that require you to take a training class or earn a credit, like the industry-specific safety program, these are great opportunities to do so. All right, our speaker this morning is Benjamin Mazer. Ben is an associate in the labor department at Coolidge Wall. Previously, Ben served as an assistant prosecutor for Montgomery County. He has significant experience with personnel matters, Title VII litigation, FMLA federal employment litigation, and workers' compensation cases, including arguing matters in front of the Industrial Commission. Ben also previously worked for a Cleveland law firm where he represented national leaders in the area of creditors' rights and advocated for his clients in court mediations, settlement conferences, and hearings throughout Northeast Ohio. So please join me in welcoming Ben.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And I'm looking forward to speaking to you about a very important and timely subject. When I discussed having this topic with Julia a couple months ago, 2 to 3 months ago, I was a little concerned as to whether or not this topic would remain timely and relevant. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, because I am speaking to you today, this topic is certainly as important now, I think, as it was when we first became aware of the COVID pandemic really last January and February. So I'm looking forward to speaking to you about this topic. I do want to do a quick disclaimer. I really should have had a slide about this, but certainly I'm giving you general advice today. When you're making these difficult decisions about whether or not to accommodate somebody, whether or not you can terminate somebody for their vaccine status, as we know, these are very fact-specific situations. Every situation is a little bit different and unique. So when you're making a decision about whether or not you should incentivize your workforce, what those levels of incentives should be, or whether or not you can terminate somebody based upon their vaccination status, you really do want to consult with your own attorney to go through the facts and discuss that further with them before you make that decision. So it shouldn't be based solely upon what you're going to hear from me today. So I do want to let you know about that. Without further ado, we can jump right in. So I do want to do just a few slides about where we're at with COVID. I think it's relevant and it's a little bit shocking, but this is what you've probably been hearing as well. I know we're all kind of trying to stay abreast of this situation, stay ahead of this situation. But take a look at this map. This is a map of course, the whole country. And I wanted to give you a map of the entire U.S. because a lot of you or some of you may have employees that travel, that leave the state of Ohio, or you may have offices outside of the state of Ohio. So you really want to be aware of the situation, across the entire United States. So you can see here, the dark red is high infection transmission rates. The orange, and that includes the state of Ohio, that is a substantial risk of transmission. Really, almost the entire United States is either red or orange. So this is what we're dealing with now. And this is in large part due to this Delta variant that I'm also going to talk a little bit about briefly. But you can see the statistics there. This is as of August the 8th, which is when I started compiling these slides, so just a few days ago, really. And this is from the CDC's website. So here are numbers specific to Ohio, COVID cases in Ohio, again, as of August the 8th. And as mentioned, the level of community transmission here in Ohio, it is substantial. It's that orange threat level. And you can see here cases in the last 7 days per 100,000, 92.3. The 7-day positivity rate, 5 to 7.9%. And again, we're in this current situation really because of this Delta variant that you've probably been hearing so much about. This Delta variant, it is more contagious than the other virus strains. It is currently, and this is as of last month, so as of July, the Delta variant is now more than 80% of our current COVID-19 cases. So the Delta variant has taken over basically. And that's what, I'm not a scientist, not a doctor, but, we were concerned about. I know the whole community, the whole world was concerned about these variants, these mutations. And, what we see here is this is probably the strongest variation that we've had yet. And it has, as these viruses do, they mutate, and it has taken over and beaten out all the other strains. So this is really, the Delta variant is why we're in the situation that we're in today, unfortunately. Fortunately, we do know that the COVID-19 vaccination, it is still very effective even against the Delta variant. So, there's a lot of information out there about what's called breakthrough cases, and breakthrough cases are, of course, true, legitimate, and what breakthrough cases are individuals who have been vaccinated for COVID, but are still getting sick. So they're still testing positive for COVID. They're still getting, they're getting the Delta variant. Those breakthrough cases, they are out there. You've probably heard a lot about them anecdotally. I certainly know individuals who've been vaccinated that have tested positive for COVID. So those are real cases, but we know that the vaccine is still very effective against the variant. And the next bullet here shows you, and this is from the CDC's website, it's really breakthrough cases are less than 1% of the fully vaccinated population, quite a bit less than 1%. So, keep that in mind, be encouraged by that. And we do know, people that do get sick, test positive for COVID-19 who have been vaccinated, their illness, their symptoms are going to be so much less severe than folks who have not been vaccinated. Okay, so there is new CDC guidance. You've probably heard about the new CDC guidance. This has come out as of the end of last month, July the 27th, and this is really in response to the Delta variant. And this new CDC guidance, again, it's guidance. It's not a mandate at this point, at least. And this is, of course, nationwide guidance. So this applies to not just specifically Ohio, but the entire country. And that guidance is that fully vaccinated individuals should wear a mask in public indoor settings in areas of substantial or high transmission. And as we know, pretty much the entire country is at least statewide in areas of substantial or high transmission. So this new guidance, it is applicable to really all of us. And it is something that, you can take heart of, you can recommend. And this presentation is not specifically about, mask and what you're going to do about mask, but, as it's always been the case, you as an employer, whether it's public sector or it's private sector, you can require your employees to wear masks. You can require customers to wear a mask, and you do just like anything else. And this hasn't changed one bit since this all began. You will want to consider accommodations for individuals who have, in particular, medical conditions that prevent them from wearing masks. But short of that, short of a disability under the ADA, you can require your workforce, you can require your customers to wear a mask when they're working for you or when they're coming in to frequent your business. The other CDC guidance that's come out here is that fully vaccinated individuals who have come into close contact with someone suspected or confirmed COVID positive, they should be treated, and these are the fully vaccinated individuals that do come into contact, they should be tested within 3 to 5 days of exposure for COVID to see whether or not they're positive. And those individuals should wear a mask in public indoor settings for 14 days or until they receive a negative test result. And again, this is for people that are fully vaccinated. So a few more numbers here. This is COVID by the numbers vaccinations edition. And this is based upon the most recent CDC numbers that I saw as well. This is the percent of the US population, the entire US population, who has received at least one dose of the COVID vaccine. That number is 69%. So that is relatively encouraging. Of course, a lot of us would like to see that number even higher. And, it is important to keep in mind that those are individuals who are not necessarily fully vaccinated yet. As we know, one dose is not enough for some of the vaccinations that are out there. But at least we know these individuals have taken the steps to get at least one dose. And presumably, we would expect that they're on the way to getting the second dose if they don't have it, if their particular brand of vaccine requires a second dose. The next number that we have is 10.5%. And those are individuals who are probably going to get vaccinated. They've expressed their intention to do that, or it's individuals who are unsure. So, those individuals who are unsure, they may or may not, of course, ultimately end up getting vaccinated either, but they're at least open to the idea. And then the last number is 17%, and those are the individuals, this group of individuals either probably will not get vaccinated or definitely will not get vaccinated. So they've expressed their intentions to to most likely forego getting a vaccine. And I thought this was interesting, you know, as business owners, as HR people, as risk management people, as employers, we're always curious as to why, you know, the thought process behind why people are either deciding to get vaccinated or hesitant or cautious or are refusing to get vaccinated. And I think this is good to know. So, you know, and this is actually just one poll. You'll find all kinds of polls out there, of course. This is an interesting topic. But one poll I looked at indicated that the individuals polled, 21% are declining to get vaccinated because they are concerned about side effects. We know a lot of people do have concerns about side effects. You know, as an employer, you know, one way to kind of think about that, you know, is allowing individuals, you know, additional time off if necessary, being flexible with your time off policies for folks that do get vaccinated. You know, if they experience symptoms, you know, making sure that you are giving them, you're open at least to the idea of them, you know, using some type of a paid time off to recover from those side effects, you know, the side effects at least as to the second dose. We know those are real. I think a lot of people are experiencing those. I didn't feel very well after my second dose for the next 24 hours after that. I did go to work. I think a lot of people are going to work even though they don't feel well, but everybody obviously reacts differently to these vaccines, and we know that. And some individuals will not feel too good, and they should be given the option, or at least you consider giving them the option of at least a day off to kind of recover. The rest of the population that has concerns, 16%, are declining to be vaccinated because they feel like the vaccine itself has not been tested enough. 10% do not think they need the vaccine. 7% want to wait and see. Another 7% do not trust vaccines in general. That is a sentiment that we're, of course, hearing. A lot of people, not a lot of people, but a certain sector of the folks that are not interested in being vaccinated, they don't trust vaccines in general. So that's certainly true of those folks. Another 7%, they do have a medical condition that prevents them from getting the vaccine. And again, that's the one thing that we've heard on this list that would entitle those individuals, of course, to some protections under the ADA. And then another 7% say COVID is not bad or the vaccine is worse. One group of people that did not show up, I guess, on this particular poll were individuals that have, you know, sincerely held religious beliefs to being vaccinated. But, you know, that again is a protected reason potentially for not requiring individuals to be vaccinated. We're going to talk more about that. But Title VII does protect those individuals who have sincerely held religious beliefs from being vaccinated. Okay, let's jump into our first substantive topic here, and that is, can you inquire into an employee's vaccination status, right? So can you ask your workforce whether or not they've been vaccinated? And the answer to that is yes. An employer may ask its workforce whether they have been vaccinated. The EEOC, which is, you know, one of the important federal bodies here that we're really looking to for guidance, they've been issuing guidance kind of in piecemeal fashion since the pandemic began last year. But the EEOC did issue guidance at the end of last year, in December of last year, and in May of this year that you want to take a look at if you haven't. And the EEOC has said that asking an employee whether or not he or she has been vaccinated is not what's considered a disability-related inquiry under the ADA, meaning that that question in of itself is not likely to elicit information about a disability. And we're going to talk more about that because I know that's it's a little bit confusing, right? But I want to touch on HIPAA, right? So, you know, you may have heard of your own employees or the public saying, you know, you cannot ask me whether or not I've been vaccinated. That's HIPAA protected, and that's a HIPAA violation to ask me that type of question. You know, that's unfortunately misinformation that's kind of spread. So that's not true. So generally, HIPAA does not apply to employers or employment records. Typically, really, the only entities that are covered under HIPAA are going to be your healthcare providers, and what we're really talking about here are patients. You know, if you go to your doctor and you're being seen for a health concern, you have HIPAA protections. Your doctor is required to comply with HIPAA, but that's really not going to apply to employers. Okay, so it is not a HIPAA violation to ask your employees about their vaccine status. So The answer, of course, was yes. You can ask your employees about their vaccination status, but as always with the law, and as any good lawyer will tell you, with any type of question that you ask a lawyer, that's with the caveat, right? That comes with the caveat, there is exceptions. So yes, but, right? That's the answer that you probably always get from your lawyer when you ask a question. 2 key points. So number 1, you do want to limit the inquiry. So what we mean by that is you can ask whether or not your employee has been vaccinated, but you want to not ask any follow-up questions about why that individual has chosen not to get vaccinated. So if you ask your employee, you ask, Joe Smith, have you been vaccinated? And he says no, you can get into, some deep waters if you go ahead and ask the follow-up question that, it makes sense. I can understand, of course, why you would ask it, but why haven't you been vaccinated, Joe? So when you ask that follow-up question, the ADA is going to say that is most likely a disability-related inquiry. And the reason for that is it is likely to elicit information from Joe about a potential disability. He could say to you, well, I have not been vaccinated because I have an autoimmune disorder, or I have some other type of medical condition that would qualify most likely as a disability, and that's preventing me from getting the vaccine. So at that point, you have engaged in asking Joe, our hypothetical employee here, a disability-related inquiry, okay? And that is going to entangle you in a web of restrictions under the ADA, and we're going to talk more about that. But the point here is you can ask Joe whether or not he's been vaccinated, but really end the inquiry there. If he says no, kind of end it at that. You now know Joe hasn't been vaccinated. And if Joe does have a disability that's preventing him from being vaccinated, he may share that with you. And at that point, you engage in the interactive process like you would with anything else pre-COVID. If your employee on the assembly line comes to you and says, I have asthma, I have anything, cancer, anything that qualifies as a disability, you know how to handle those situations. You've been handling them outside of the COVID realm before. So, you would then engage in that interactive process and discuss accommodations with that employee. But we don't want you to necessarily go there unless you have to, right? So again, a disability-related inquiry, those are questions that are intended or likely to elicit information about a disability. And that follow-up question to Joe as to why he has not been vaccinated, that's going to do that. So here's the standard here that the ADA sets about disability-related inquiries. If you go there, if you do decide to go there and you're like, okay, I'm going to charge ahead and I want to find out why Joe has not been vaccinated, just know that you have to be able to prove if Joe, after the fact, raises concerns about how you handle the situation. You have to be able to show that that question you asked, that follow-up question, it was job-related and it was consistent with business necessity, okay? So it's going to be very fact-specific. You may have to say, well, this is the type of business I run. My employees have interactions with the public. My employees work, in close confines with one another. There's no ability to socially distance. You're going to have to, jump through some hurdles to prove that you're legally entitled to ask Joe why he was not vaccinated, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. And the second part of this the second part is you have to maintain the confidentiality of the information that you get from your workforce. So a vaccination status is medical information. So when that employee shares with you whether or not they've been vaccinated, you're going to treat it just like you would treat any other medical information that that employee is sharing with you, okay? And what that means is you're going to want to control access to that information. So just like with medical records, any information that you get, paper copies, hard copies of information you get about that individual's vaccination status, it should be stored separately from that employee's personnel file, the rest of that employee's personnel file. That should be a practice that you're doing with medical records anyways for employees. That's something that we always recommend, outside of this whole vaccination and pandemic-related scenario that we're in. Medical records, you want to have a separate file for that employee for medical records to ensure that they stay confidential, okay? So vaccination status, it's medical information. It should be kept confidential. And ordinarily, managers, supervisors, you should not be sharing that individual's vaccination status with those folks. And that's for your company's protection, okay? So, if managers, supervisors become aware of an individual's vaccination status, that individual could claim, if later a supervisor or a manager gives that employee a bad performance evaluation or, writes up that employee, you're kind of opening the door if that manager knows about that employee's medical information or vaccination status. You're kind of opening up the door for that employee to say, well, they're only doing this, right, in retaliation for my vaccination status. So you want to be able to say, well, no, we don't share that with our managers and supervisors. They had no idea about this. It could not have been, right, in retaliation for Joe's vaccination status. So keeping those records, keeping that information confidential. Okay, the next question is, how about job applicants, right? How about job candidates? Can we ask them about their vaccination status? So really the answer again is going to be yes. Most likely though, if you're asking job applicants, you should really be asking the rest of your workforce too. You don't want to necessarily hold job applicants to a different standard. Certainly, if it's important enough to ask job applicants, it is of course important enough to ask the rest of your workforce that's already working for you. So you just want to be consistent. You want to be consistent. That's true of any policy that you have, and that's really a good way to go about preventing yourself from getting into trouble by treating job applicants differently. Again, as I mentioned, yes, you can ask them about their vaccination status, but the same key points apply, right, as with asking your current workforce about their vaccination status. You want to limit the inquiry. Don't ask that follow-up question as to why have you not gotten your vaccination. The ADA specifically does prohibit employers, right, from asking applicants disability-related inquiries. So, when you're interviewing Susan for a job, you really shouldn't be asking Susan, do you have any disabilities necessarily that are going to prevent you, from doing the job. Likewise, you wouldn't really want to get into that about, their vaccination status, which could lend them to provide you some information about a disability. And again, you just like we said, maintain confidentiality. So if you have a file for your job applicants and they hand you something in paper, a vaccine card or something, keep that separate. Maintain the confidentiality of that job applicant's vaccination status. So there are some risks, obviously, to asking an applicant about their vaccination status. In addition to what we've already discussed, certainly, the question is, right, can I condition a job offer on that employee's vaccination status? You can. We don't recommend it. That is going to potentially, again, lead to some accommodation request. It could lead to claims of discrimination. The better situation or the better scenario is to, instead of conditioning a job offer on a job candidate's vaccination status, you could consider advising that employee or that prospective employee, right, that they will be required to be vaccinated by their first day of work. That's a good alternative. That gives them time, you're making them aware of the requirements, and you're not getting into asking them about any potential disabilities or religious reasons why they're not going to get vaccinated. You're not conditioning that offer, job offer, on their vaccination status. Again, we're going to talk about accommodations, but you certainly should provide an accommodation to a new hire who cannot be vaccinated for a protected reason, disability, sincerely held religious belief. And always be transparent when it comes to this type of a situation. If you are going to have a requirement that a new hire be vaccinated, really let that applicant know at the earliest stage of the interview and application process as possible that you are an employer that is going to require vaccines. So they're not surprised, so they don't feel taken aback or angry. You're going to avoid a lot of problems in the long run if you're transparent about that. All right, so the next question is, can an employer ask for proof of vaccination status? This is a little bit different than what we've been talking about, right? So we've been talking about just asking an employee to provide an answer, a yes or no answer as to whether or not they're vaccinated. This is actually asking to see proof. So, one way to do this would be, I need to see your vaccination card, right? For those of us who've been vaccinated, you have a vaccination card, most likely. So can you ask Joe to see a proof of vaccination? Ask Joe to see his vaccination card. Again, the answer is yes. It's not a disability-related inquiry, but same rules apply. Any follow-up questions, could trigger the ADA. And a way to avoid any potential problems is to, if you're going to ask for proof, just ask to see that vaccination card. Tell the employee, I don't want to see I'm not asking to see any other medical information or medical records from your doctor. I just would like to see your vaccination card. So kind of limit it right then and there, nip any potential problems in the bud. Okay, let's get into the second of our three big substantive topics, and that's, can employers incentivize employees to get vaccinated? And the answer to that is yes. Again, yes, but, right? So yes, but consistent with the following. The question you want to ask yourself is, did you as the business, as the employer, administer the vaccine directly to your workforce? I don't think a lot of employers are necessarily doing this, at least not a lot of the employers that I've spoken to about how they're handling vaccines, but I'm sure there certainly are some that are doing this, and you may be one of them. But the question is, did you administer the vaccines directly to your employees? In other words, did your employees come into your factory and you had somebody there, maybe you contracted with CVS or Walmart to be there to administer the vaccine to your workforce and provide them that option? If the answer is no, I did not contract with a third party to administer the vaccines on site to our workforce, then you can offer incentives, and there's really no restriction on the value of the incentives offered. You can really offer whatever type of incentives that you want to your workforce. However, the analysis is going to be different if you did administer the vaccines directly to your workforce, or you contracted with a CVS or Walmart to come into your workspace to do this. And the answer is, if you did administer vaccines directly, you can still offer incentives to your workforce, but, and this is coming directly from the EEOC, the incentives cannot be so substantial as to be deemed coercive. That's a little bit subjective, right? What is substantial? What's going to be deemed coercive? It's a tough question, and in true EEOC fashion, the EEOC does a great job with a lot of things, but the EEOC does not define for us as lawyers that represent businesses or businesses themselves. The EEOC does not give us examples really of what is too substantial so as to be deemed coercive. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but you're going to have to use your best judgment. Again, this is a situation where you want to loop in your own lawyer to talk about your proposed incentive program to see whether or not it's going to be too substantial. But let's talk more about that. So the question is, why is the EEOC doing this, right? Why are they putting us through this? The difference is this, right? So if you're an employer that is administering vaccines directly, whether you're doing it or the CVS pharmacy tech that you hired is doing it, you're asking those employees pre-vaccination disability-related screening questions, right? So what does that mean? So I went to a clinic, Montgomery County, to get vaccinated for COVID. The person there that did my vaccine, right, she asked me, she said, do I have any allergies to vaccines? Have I had any adverse reactions to vaccines in the past? She didn't ask me this because I'm a male, but if you're female, they may ask you whether or not you're pregnant, right? These are questions that as a healthcare provider administering a vaccine, you have to ask to make sure that there's no risk to the individual getting vaccinated. These are absolutely disability-related screening questions. So if you as the employer are asking these questions of your employee, or you're hiring somebody or contracting with a CVS person to ask these questions, you've engaged now in asking disability-related inquiries. This is why it's unique from an employer who hasn't gotten involved in this, right? So a very large incentive, if you're offering employees, let's say $5,000, I think we could probably say maybe $5,000 is substantial, right? So if you're offering your employees your incentive program $5,000 to get vaccinated, and you're also an employer that's administering vaccines directly, the EEOC courts could determine that this large incentive is making employees feel pressured to disclose to you protected medical information in order to get the vaccine. So you could be pressuring them to tell you their health history, their disabilities, in order to get through the pre-screening process in order to get that vaccination. So that's why there's the distinction there. Okay, that's why there's the difference. And really, for employers that are administering vaccines directly or contracting with a third party to do it, the incentive that you're offering your workforce cannot be so large, so great, as to render the voluntary vaccination program effectively involuntary. It's an incentive, so it shouldn't be so substantial that it's coercive, again, right? So let's talk a little bit about some examples. I think this is hopefully going to be a little bit helpful to clarifying what you can and can't do. And this is, the EEOC has not taken us here, so we have to go here on our own, right? So here's some examples of what I would consider to be permitted incentives. You may have heard in the news, you may already be offering some of these. You may know of competitors that are offering some of these. You may know of other individuals in the same sector of your industry that are offering these. Now, a one-time cash incentive. If you're an employer who has not administered the vaccine directly, you can feel free. You have the additional flexibility to kind of figure out what you think that incentive should be. $100, $50, $200, but you could offer that. Again, you have to think about this a little bit differently. All of these examples a little bit differently if you are an employer, right, who administer the vaccine directly. If you're an employer who administer the vaccine directly, a $5,000 one-time cash incentive is not probably a good idea, okay? Gift cards, offering employees an opportunity to enter into a lottery for a larger prize, and additional paid time off. That is something that we see some employers doing, offering additional PTO, offering maybe an additional 2 floating holidays or vacation days that they can opt to take if they get vaccinated. That's an option. And I have heard of employers doing just a raise, a flat raise. Again, if you're an employer who administered vaccines directly, I don't think a raise is necessarily a good idea. You want to be cautious about that. That could be deemed too substantial or coercive as to transitioning your voluntary program into involuntary. So be a little bit cautious about some of these depending upon whether or not you have the additional flexibility of an employer who did not get involved in the vaccination process. Again, talk to your lawyer about these maybe before you choose which path you want to go down. Again, as we said, the EOC does not give us any examples. We're using our best judgment, right? So if you're an employer that administers vaccines directly, err on the side of low value. Maybe I would say $100 or less, maybe even $50 or less in value. Use your best judgment. Talk to your lawyer. Okay, now the question is, what if somebody in your workforce has a protected reason, right, for not getting vaccinated, and you have this incentive program? This individual has, though, a disability that's protected under the ADA, or they have a sincerely held religious belief that's protected under Title VII. Can those individuals still participate in the incentive program, or are they foreclosed, right, from getting that $25 iTunes gift card? So the answer to this, and this is certainly the risk-adverse approach, is to not exclude an individual from participating in the incentive program who has a protected reason for not being vaccinated. So, if the reason is protected, you don't want to necessarily exclude them. You want to probably still give them the same incentive that you're giving the rest of your vaccinated workforce. That's a way to avoid a potential disability discrimination claim or a religious discrimination claim. A lot of these incentives that we're talking about, they are probably going to be nominal. It's not worth it to, not give that employee who has a real legitimate reason from becoming vaccinated. It's not worth it to withhold from them maybe a $25 iTunes gift card and then turn around and get slapped with a lawsuit. That's going to end up costing you, as thousands and thousands of dollars to defend. So now this is for just folks though that do come to you and they say, look, they make you aware of a protected reason, right, for not being vaccinated. This is not for the individual who, again, we talked about the individual in that poll, that said maybe, I don't think COVID's bad, I think the vaccine is worse. That individual, you shouldn't include them obviously in the incentive program. They're not entitled to participate. And then again, the reason that we're doing this, right, keep in mind the reason that you're offering this incentive is to encourage unvaccinated employees who do not have a protected reason for being unvaccinated to get their shots. So you're targeting the folks that, who are on the fence, who are, maybe not inclined to get vaccinated for a reason that's not related to a medical condition or a sincerely held religious belief. Okay, our last substantive topic here, and that's, can an employer mandate vaccinations, right? So, what we mean by that, right, is can we require our workforce to get vaccinated? And if they don't get vaccinated, if Joe doesn't get vaccinated, can we fire Joe, right? That's the question. So, again, the answer is yes, but, so, per the EEOC, yes, employers may require their workforce to be vaccinated in order to enter the workplace. But, here's your but, right? As long as you as an employer are providing reasonable accommodations for individuals who have a disability or a sincerely held religious belief that is preventing them from being vaccinated. Okay, so those are the two protections here that we're concerned about. And let's talk more about that. Okay, so what about, first, this is kind of the easier, nothing's always easy, right? But this is the easier piece of this analysis. What about Joe, who does not have a disability that he's made you aware of, or a sincerely held religious belief that he's made you aware of that's preventing him from getting his vaccine. Let's say Joe is he's anti-vaccinations in general. He doesn't like any vaccinations. Can you fire Joe? Can you fire Joe? The answer is yes. He's not made you aware of any protections or anything that would be a protected reason under federal or state law, right, from being vaccinated. So Joe is subject to termination for not being vaccinated if he doesn't have a religious belief or a disability that's preventing him from being vaccinated. You want to make sure, though, again, and this is something I've touched on already, if you're firing Joe for not being vaccinated and not having a protected reason from foregoing vaccinations, you also want to fire Sally if Sally, like Joe, is refusing to be vaccinated and doesn't have a valid protected reason from being vaccinated. You want to, again, just like any other policies you have as an employer, you want to ensure that you're implementing and administering your policies uniformly. Treat everybody the same, okay? And that's going to avoid, obviously, discrimination claims. Because, Joe may say, well, why did you fire me? Is it because I'm over the age of 40? Is it because maybe Sally's, you didn't fire Sally and maybe she's, 28. So you don't want to give Joe a reason to second guess why he was terminated and Sally wasn't. Is it my age? Is it my national origin, my race, my sexual orientation, right? So that's why we try to implement all policies and administer them all uniformly, consistently. Okay, can you terminate an unvaccinated employee who is unvaccinated, right, due to a disability or a sincerely held religious belief? It's going to depend whether or not you can offer them a reasonable accommodation. And this is just like, again, you've dealt with this before COVID happened, right? Individuals who have a disability and they come to you and it's affecting their ability to do their jobs. Just like that, it depends. It depends if there's a reasonable accommodation, right, that you can offer Joe that's not going to cause an undue hardship to you as an employer. You have to go through that analysis. We're going to talk more about that. The ADA, it does allow employers to maintain, as you're aware, I'm sure, safety-based qualifications. So that requirement is that an individual shall not pose a direct threat to the health or safety of individuals in the workplace. And we do have, based upon the guidance that the CDC and the EOC has given us since COVID began, we do have some firm ground that we can rely upon that basically says, during a time of a pandemic, and this has been declared a pandemic for a while now, a lot of, states and local governments have declared, states of emergencies. Some of them have since lifted that. Some of them are reimposing that since it's been lifted. But, we have enough out there to be able to hang our hat on to say that an unvaccinated individual can pose a direct threat to the health or safety of individuals in the workplace. But, the caveat is it is always going to be a fact-specific analysis that you're going to want to engage in, because the direct threat analysis is going to be different or potentially different, depending upon your specific workplace, right? Your specific business, right? So, if your business is completely remote, right? If you operate a call center type of a business, right? Where most of your employees are maybe operating out of their home, it's a customer service business. They have a setup in their home where they're answering customer service calls, right, in their own private office. Maybe they never come into the workplace. There is maybe no physical workplace that they come into where other employees or customers congregate. That analysis may be a little bit different, right? So it may be harder to say that unvaccinated individual who's working just out of their home is a direct threat to the rest of your workforce. You may not be able to make that case. So this is not a one size fits all situation. You want to be aware of that. So again, this is where you consult your attorney and say, look, do you think this is a situation where we can say this unvaccinated individual poses a direct threat, okay? Again, as with any disability or religious exemption claim, engage in the interactive process with your employees that raise this issue with you rather, and talk to them. What is your medical condition? What are your sincerely held religious beliefs? Find out, you can ask them again, at least with a disability medical condition, you can ask them for medical documentation to support it. You can ask for their doctor to provide you a doctor's note and diagnosis, or the doctor to provide you some examples of accommodations that the doctor believes would allow this employee to continue to work for you and perform the essential functions of their job. You can ask for that stuff, just like with any other disability claim that you're made aware of or disability that your employee raises with you. Potential accommodations, right? So let's say Joe has a disability. It prevents him from being vaccinated. It's legitimate. He's protected under the ADA. You can't just turn around and fire Joe without engaging in this process with him. You need to look at these accommodations that would maybe allow Joe to be safe, the rest of your workforce to be safe, and still allow Joe to do the essential functions of his job. That's always the question, right? Can Joe still do his job? If the answer is no, then we go to the next step and we make a determination whether or not we can let Joe go. But otherwise, you should be considering some accommodations. These types of accommodations you've already probably been considering for your workforce once this pandemic began, but those options may be working remotely. Can Joe do his job from home? Working alternative hours. Can Joe come in maybe earlier on in the morning before the rest of your workforce gets there, or later on in the afternoon or at night when there's less employees there, maybe when there's less customers there, reducing that risk to Joe and the rest of your workforce and your customers. Can you maybe put Joe in a different area of the office where he'll have less contact with coworkers or the public? These are accommodations that you should consider, in particular when it comes to somebody maybe who can't be vaccinated. And again, asking the doctor for suggestions. But this is the interactive process, right? Discussing these options with Joe, considering these options. Employees must still be able to perform the essential functions of their job in order to be qualified. So if these options, require you as an employer to eliminate Joe's job duties and give him a new set of job duties, you don't have to do that. That's not something that Joe is entitled to necessarily, okay? Okay, what if no reasonable accommodation exists for the vaccinated, protected employee? As an employer, you should consider 4 factors. These come from the EOC, and these will help you decide whether or not a direct threat exists. So this is the direct threat analysis that we were talking about, right? This is going to be very fact-specific. This is going to be something that you want to discuss with your personal, your business's attorney. But these are the things that you're looking at: the duration of the risk, the nature and the severity of the potential harm, the likelihood that the potential harm will occur, and the imminence of the potential harm. And again, you're going to be looking at things whether, things like, is our workforce remote? Is our workforce able to socially distance? How much interaction do they have with the public? Are you a bus driver, right? You're driving the bus. You can't work from home. You're going to see the public every day. You're going to be exposed to a huge population. You may be exposed to at-risk populations, right? The elderly, children. As a bus driver, that's a unique situation. It may not be the same for your customer service folks who work remotely from home, right? So that's what we're talking about here. Again, you may not be able to automatically terminate the employee, but in the meantime, while you're weighing your options, you're talking with your attorney, you can exclude them from the workplace, right? You may temporarily put them on remote work. You may consider putting them on paid or unpaid leave. But if no reasonable accommodation does exist for an individual with a disability or a sincerely held religious belief, and you can't minimize, right, the direct threat, again, we're talking about the direct threat here, you can then, talk to your attorney about considering termination. Again, a termination is going to be high risk. It is going to be high risk. Even if you're able to say, yes, check all the boxes, yes, they're a direct threat, yes, there's no reasonable accommodation without undue hardship. You check all those boxes and you say, okay, I feel okay about terminating them. It's still going to be a high risk, what we would call a high risk termination, right? You're opening yourself up to a discrimination claim under the ADA or Title VII if the employee has religious reasons for not being vaccinated. So how do we deal with these, right? How do we deal, and this is true of any termination, right, that you think is high risk. I always, talk to clients about, what about doing a separation agreement? That includes a release of liability claim or release of liability provision. So what that looks like is, right, you've probably done these, you've seen these, you can offer, you're going to have to offer the employee something. There has to be some type of a consideration here. But maybe you offer Joe $5,000 in exchange for Joe releasing your business from any type of claim that he could bring. ADA, ADEA, Title VII, state law claims, considering doing this. And that gives you peace of mind. You're putting some money out there, but you're also knowing that Joe's not going to be able to turn around and sue you, okay? So we're at the last slide. We're wrapping up here, right? So this is just a summary, right? So if you're considering an incentive program or mandating employee vaccinations, again, this is a recap. Exercise due care in administering your policy. Make sure you do it consistently, you do it uniformly. I would have a written policy, put it in writing, vet your policy with your attorney, make sure that it's good. Refrain from asking any unnecessary screening questions that may qualify as a disability-related inquiry. Don't ask those follow-up questions. It's human nature to ask them, but don't ask them. Keep confidential any medical information that's shared with you by your employees. Keep it confidential, put it in a separate file. You may want to, have it locked up. Don't share it with supervisors or managers. Your HR person should probably know about it. Executives can know about it, but otherwise don't make it common knowledge with the rest of the workforce. And engage in that interactive process with employees who request accommodations or exemptions from being vaccinated for health-related or religious reasons. You've already done this interactive process before. It shouldn't be new to you. It's no different now than it's always been. Same type of situation. Okay, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, so please feel free. And I'll just say, while you're thinking of questions perhaps, I'm always happy to help answer questions after our presentation today. I know, these things are going to come up. That they may not have come up yet, but they may come up, later on this week down the road. We're not out of the woods yet, far from it. So we're stuck in this for the long haul, I think, for the time being at least. So you will see there on the screen, of course, my email address and my direct dial. So if you think of questions after today, always feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to assist. Looks like no questions. I really appreciate being here and speaking with all of you today. I hope you have a great rest of the week and weekend, and stay well, stay healthy, and I hope your workforce does the same. Thank you.